I think it's a good practice to identify next steps in persuasion. So if you're raising awareness, as you're doing in many cases in these persuasive speeches, what can we as audience members do? And we want to leave the audience with an idea, or what about the next steps can they take. So I want to talk through a few of these strategies for designing these calls to actions, these recommendations. And to begin with, I want to distinguish between a cure and a call to action, because often these can get confused. A cure is what needs to happen in order to solve the ill or the blame. Okay? A call to action is an incremental step to help implement that cure. So it's what can we do to see that, to help that cure be implemented, be put into place, become a reality. So these calls to action should be realistic and doable, because you're asking your audience to play a role in the implementation of that cure. And so in the US we've got Netflix. Netflix is a streaming video source. So at home I watch all these movies, and really what I end up watching a lot of are issue documentaries. And issue documentaries are basically persuasive speeches on any number of topics, on food, the role of corn production, or the dangers of fast food, or the dangers of, I'm trying to think of one that I watched, dealing with housing insulation. It sounds boring, but it's fascinating stuff. But anyways, these issue documentaries are almost all the same, right? They are, ill, blame, cure, call to action. And if you watch any one of these, it's almost comic how much the conventions have ossified around these documentaries. So, they'll start off, and usually the lighting and the ill and the blame is kind of bad. And then when they get to cure, there's a change, and all of a sudden it's open and the music picks up. And when they get to call to action, it's all snapshots and editing and quick zips in and out and things you can do. And it's enjoyable, and it also sort of recognizes, this pattern works often. But this call to action is what they end on, because it's asking that audience to go out and do something. It's asking that audience to make some type of change. So what then can your call to action do? Well, it can speak to the legislative process, right? So what legislation should we support, and how can we as audience members support it? Sort of the famous line here is usually, call or write your congressperson, or sign this petition. Okay, those are calls to action. You're asking your audience to do something, and you're saying, what you do here will help implement that larger cure. If you're raising awareness, maybe asking that audience merely to be an agent of change, or get more informed on the issue. So you're telling them, what sort of books should they read, or what other sources of information should they expose themselves to arm them with the knowledge that they'll need to enact the cure that you're talking about. So you end a speech on food safety by saying, if you're interested, here are a couple of websites, or here's a book that you can read. Okay, you're giving us something to do, something to help implement the change in our lives or in society. If you're talking about raising awareness around an organization, a nonprofit, you're directing my attention, my interest to this other topic. Famous example here are, any argument for blood donation. Right, so most of those speeches end with, you should donate blood, or if you're interested, go to redcross.org to find a local blood donation center. Okay, so it's telling me what I can do to implement this cure. In that case, hypothetically, it is the standard model is we don't have enough blood resources. This is because of lack of awareness, or lack of interest, or lack of certain types. The cure is to increase awareness about blood donation, and certainly increase the stock of blood that we have. So tell your friends what they can do, make sure people are aware of the need for blood, and of course, go donate blood yourself. So that call to action is giving me something that I can do. These calls to action can also just be changes in personal behavior. So what can I do tomorrow that will help improve the ill? Or what can I do tomorrow that will help implement the cure? You may remember back to the sample student speech that we watched last week, Kathy's speech on fair trade. Right, one of the calls to action in there is buy fair trade products. That's a call to action. It's saying we want to support this larger economic practice, and one of the best ways to support that economic practice is for you to change your consuming behavior. So buy fair trade. So this is simply something that you're leaving your audience with. In life, we want to do this all the time. So at the end of business meetings, you might be making recommendations. Sometimes these are called deliverables or action items. Certainly fundraising is all about the call to action, and that call to action is always give money. So you're building a case so that giving money makes sense and you understand why there is a need for you to give money. In community organizations, here in the U.S. we have parent-teacher associations, and these are all about calls to action, making the case for why and how parents should get involved in their child's school. But the idea here is to make sure that people can clearly see how these specific actions relate to the overall cures. Right? We don't want to have a call to action that seems very disconnected from that cure. We're getting to this issue of congruency. We want to be able to say, here's where the cure is, and then here's what you can do, and here's how what you're going to do advances that cure. So, by way of conclusion of this section, by this point now, if you're working on a speech in general in following this model, or if you're working on a speech for this class to upload and post, by now you should have all your argumentative elements. You should have developed your case through stock issues. You've got an idea of what you're arguing there. You've thought about whether or not you should include counter-arguments, and if so, what those counter-arguments will look like. And now you've got some background in terms of thinking of calls to action. So in the next lecture, we're going to take a look at how you arrange some options for arranging all these various argumentative elements in a way that's motivational and in a way that will allow you to write a stylistically rich and moving speech.